Hello, my name is Emily Beynon and today I'm going to talk about the William Tell Overture. The passage we're going to talk about today is the duet between the cor anglais and the flute after the big storm scene. It's a pastoral episode and you can just imagine that after the storm and all the rain, the sun comes out, the grass looks greener, the birds sing more beautifully, the air is fresher, and we're in a most relaxed, calm G major passage. And something of this joyful, sonorous G major needs to shine through your playing. The cor anglais begins and is answered by exactly the same phrase in the flute. Then the cor anglais goes a step further and is once again answered by the flute. And thereafter, the episode is really a duo for the two instruments, with the cor anglais continuing the melodic line and the flute decorating lightly above it, with a very sparse accompaniment. Now, there are some elements of playing this in an audition which are slightly easier than playing it in the orchestra. For example, you can choose your tempo. But the more difficult aspect is the fact that you'll be alone in the audition. You won't have that cor anglais with you. So make sure you know that cor anglais part better than you know your part so that you can take it with you into the audition, in your head. So the first step would be to record that cor anglais part yourself so that you can play along with that as you're working on this piece. And when you do record the cor anglais part, just bear in mind a couple of traditions. For example, one bar before G almost always takes a little time, and at letter F, the tempo usually goes slightly forward, slightly more flowing. Regarding the tempo, I've played it at all sorts of tempos. In the edition I'm using today, the guideline is 76, but more often than not, it's something more like 63, 66, 60 even, so make sure that you practice it at all sorts of different tempos. So why do they ask this piece for an orchestral audition? Well, of course, in a relatively short space of time, we can hear and show lots of different aspects of our playing. Of course, we've got the lyrical cantabile beginning, showing a wonderful sound and beautiful vibrato and excellent phrasing. Then we've got the middle section where you can show a variety of staccatos, from the crispest, shortest to a little longer lyrical staccato. And then there are lots of rhythmic traps to fall in and intonation traps to fall in. So there's plenty to cover. So let's break the solo down into 3 sections. Let's look at the very first section when you're answering the cor anglais. First, look at the phrase structure. We've got a short phrase, and a longer phrase. The second bar is a complete repetition of the first bar, so try and find some reason for that repetition. Are you going to play it a little stronger, a little lighter, a little more sostenuto? We need to hear the purpose of that repetition. Now look at the microphrasing. How are the beats structured within that first microphrase, the first 3 beats? And I would like to suggest that the second beat has a real lift to it, a moment of zero gravity, if you like. Maybe we could think of the first beat or so as being a little diminuendo and the third beat a little crescendo into the next bar. So the moment that we leave the G and go on to the A, that's the most lifted point of the bar, and then we can give the rest of the bar direction into the second bar. And the third phrase, we start again from the same G major chord that we've had for the 2 little phrases before, but now we're going towards the beginning of the trill with the dominant chord underneath. And I would start this trill a little slower, a real vocal trill. This is an opera after all. Now the second phrase, I would place that exactly where the cor anglais would play. It's the same harmony. No one's going to be shocked. They're going to be more shocked if they start singing the cor anglais part in their head and then that you interrupt it halfway through. Now this is a more intense harmony. It's an A minor chord. It's a higher note. Maybe it's a little closer to the listener. So I would play this slightly stronger so that when we get the D major chord in the next bar, we can relax slightly. And then we relax even more when we come back to the tonic key, the home key of G major. And the only interesting thing harmonically here is underneath the C sharp, we have the diminished chord. So moving on, making sure that you sing along with the cor anglais in your head. The next entry, the D, give that quite a clear beginning so that we can make a nice little release through this long D. Now, I think the next few bars are a wonderful opportunity to show that you've got a variety of lengths of your staccato, because a dot can mean 1,000 things. In the moving passages on the first beat, I would play those at medium stroked length. And then the repeated Ds on the second beat, that's the lightest beat. So there I would use my shortest possible staccato. It's the same note, so they need to sound very, very short, but very, very light. And then again with the moving line on the third beat going into the next first beat, that can be a slightly more stroked. Now when we get to the D major arpeggio bar, there are two things to look out for here. One is that the middle D doesn't get too loud. It's a very intense note on the flute, and if you're not careful, that will stick out quite strongly. The same goes for the very first bar of the solo, by the way. And the second thing is, of course, to make sure that the top notes aren't too prominent. So I would practice lots of the A diminishing up to the D, a long A diminishing up to the F sharp, and A diminishing up to the A. And for this whole bar, quite a stroked staccato, but not as long as the bar after. Here we've got the staccato dots, but we've also got the slur. So this is your longest possible staccato. Da 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 da. You're merely disturbing the airstream underneath a legato. So in these 4 bars, we've got 4 quite clear different staccatos on offer. We've got the super short repeated Ds, very soft, very light, absolutely crystal clear. The next longest are the slightly melodic first and third beats. Then we've got the D major arpeggio bar, which can be really quite a broad staccato. And then the chromatic scale, the legato staccato coming down from the top G. And I would just hint to the jury that you understand that this bar can take a little time. Linger ever so slightly on the first beat of the bar, and then a subtly pronounced third beat of the bar, the F sharp, the leading note coming back to the G, so that the cor anglais player would know exactly where to place the next first beat of the bar. And then the second half of the second section of this passage has many of the same features, the variety of the length of staccato. We have a modulation, and it's a slightly shorter phrase, so the breathing's slightly easier, but the fingers are slightly more tricky with the B major arpeggio instead of the D major that we had in the previous phrase. And then we're at letter G, and you are an accompanying figure to melodic material, which is very similar to the beginning, but instead of having the short phrase, long phrase, here we've got a 1-bar phrase and then a 3-bar phrase. So make sure that your accompanying figure echoes the same phrasing as the melody. That means at the end of the second bar of G and the end of the third bar of G, you're going to keep the phrase going. Don't collapse at that point. Obviously, you will have recorded the cor anglais part, so you'll know how that feels. Now, this tricky little rhythm at the start, I think the most important is that the D is in the right place. So aiming for that note. And just really think about whether you need to breathe in every single rest. I think quite a lot of these rests can just be silence without you breathing. Just look at these 4 bars from 217. The octaves bar is the flute solo, and the cor anglais answers underneath the trill. So make sure that your trill is not too dominant. In these wide intervals, they can take quite a light, lyrical, stroked staccato, not super short, and take care of the balance between the top register note and the middle register note. Maybe it's nice to do one of those absolutely strictly in tempo and the other just to hint at the freedom that you might have being your solo bar. Do make sure that in these G major chords that the D isn't too flat and the top G isn't too sharp. And in these last 5 bars, make sure you keep listening to the cor anglais player in your head, that the long notes are long enough. And I would suggest using this as a fabulous opportunity to show that you've got a healthy low register and that you can make a beautiful diminuendo to the top G, giving a little bit more sound on the arpeggio. And once you arrive on the long note, diminish a little bit so that we can all hear the cor anglais in your head. but overall a diminuendo through these last 5 bars. And once you arrive on the top G, imagine your vibrato is getting faster and faster and faster and smaller and smaller and smaller, so we shimmer into the distance, only to be broken by the most famous trumpet call of all. I hope you've enjoyed this. See you next time.